I'm Charlene Saker, and this is Living in Between. Between our first breath and the day we reunite with Jesus, there's this in-between space, the not yet, the place where life unfolds, where we learn, where we wrestle, where we grow. So how do we live well here? Even when it's hard, even when it's messy, let's figure it out together.
And welcome to the second episode of Living in Between. Now, if you didn't listen to last week's episode, go and listen to episode 1. And this is where I explain a lot more in detail about what this show is all about, and also explain a bit of context for this Life with Impact podcast channel. So go and listen to the other episodes. We also have all these episodes up on YouTube, and so you can watch video and see us face to face, and it feels like we're having a conversation. So welcome to my living room. In this episode, I want to share a bit more of my story and the different journeys God has me on. Now, I'm only 36, which means I'm like halfway through my lifespan, more or less on average. And so it means that there's many more parts or many more stories to unfold and lessons to be learned and revelations to be had. So I'm by no means in a place where I can say I've figured this out. But I want to share from my heart about my journey into motherhood and just the important lessons that God has taught me. Because I think one of the recurring themes in my life and in the different parts of my story and my faith and my journey with God has been getting to know who God really is and letting go of my idealism, my idea that this is how things should work. You know, when you're young, early 20s, I speak to people in their early 20s and it's natural, and it's just a part of being in that season of life. But you feel like anything is possible. You feel like I can find a Mr. Right or Mrs. Right. It can work out the way that I want it to. If you work hard enough, you can get into the course that you want to study. There's this feeling of anything is possible. And yet, at the same time, a lot of my experiences have been that it doesn't always go that way, right? It's sometimes you have a lot of faith and you do your best, but it doesn't work out. And those are the moments where our theology is tested, where what we truly believe comes into question. Do we just believe in this one version of God that we've created for ourselves? The version where God comes through for us and answers our prayers and does the things we want Him to? Or do we know who God really is? And do we know His heart for us? And do we understand why certain things need to happen? Why certain things just happen? And that's very much where I wanna go in this show and in the series. And so join me. And I want to just give a little disclaimer. If you are sensitive about subjects around miscarriage and birth and pregnancy and all of that, I just want to warn you that I'm going to be talking about that a lot in this episode. And so don't shy away from the hard topics, but also protect your heart and just know what you have capacity for at this moment. So I'm gonna get into my story and my journey into motherhood. Now, I've heard a lot of women say that they were like born to be mothers, but I really felt like this was true. I was born to be a mom. I was obsessed with babies from the moment I was big enough to actually hold a baby. I was in church all around holding people's babies. I've got photos with other people's babies, and I babysat and I played with them and I carried them around, and I was just so obsessed. I love babies. I remember as a teenager it might sound weird, but I kept having dreams about adopting babies and had these dreams that I would find a baby that's been abandoned and raise it. And for me, just mothering felt like the most natural thing I could ever want and that I could ever do. And it was something that was, I think, God-given and beautiful. But anyhow, so I got married quite young, at 22, and this was back in 2012. I got married, and if you get married young, you kind of know that you don't have to have kids right away. But I remember after the first year of marriage, I thought I was pregnant, and it was like something switched in me, in my heart. And from that moment on, I just got so obsessed with the idea of falling pregnant. And it was such a hard journey. We only actually ended up having a child after 5 years of marriage. So it was like a few years of just really desperately wanting to be pregnant. It's not like we were trying, because I knew it wasn't the right season. And thank God for my husband, who had the wisdom to say, not yet, not yet, because there was some growing up that needed to happen. But I just remember being so obsessed with it. And now in retrospect, and I'll tell you more parts of the story, but in retrospect, if I look at all these events that happened, I can see how I idolized motherhood. It was something that I wanted so badly. But what I've realized is the reality isn't always the same as the ideal, but also that anything that we idolize that is not God Himself is going to disappoint us at some point, especially in a broken world where things don't always go the way we plan them. And so I didn't realize it then, but it was dangerous ground for me because I had built up such expectation. And so I believe that God in His kindness helped my story to play out a certain way so that I could grow, so that I could understand what motherhood really meant. Now, after 5 years of marriage, and this was in 2016, so maybe let's say about 4 years of marriage, we decided, okay, maybe it's time to start trying, because we know that some people can take, they say up to 2 years is the average. So it doesn't necessarily happen fast. Thankfully for us, it didn't take long. It was pretty soon after that point. And, now I'm like, okay, I've waited for years to have a baby. And so, you know how we do that. We tell ourselves, okay, finally we've been patient and we've waited for the thing we want. And so now surely it has to work out. And I had about a month of just bliss before I had to go see the gynae for my first scan. And just, if you've ever been pregnant, you'll know that within the first day, you've already dreamt up your whole future. You've already thought about that moment where you get to hold the baby, and you've just dreamt of all these moments. And I was so excited. It was like a dream come true for me. And at our first scan, when I was about 9 weeks along, and this was the first time I ever went to the gynae, right? So it was quite a big deal. And when the gynae did the scan, she said, "I'm so sorry, there's no heartbeats." And basically what had happened is that the baby had stopped growing at around 7.5, 8 weeks. And so they classified it as a missed miscarriage. So essentially the baby stopped growing, heart stopped beating, and the next process would be to either have a D&C. If you don't know what that is, that's where they remove the pregnancy, and so they do that kind of surgically, or you can wait to do that at home. And so it was such a traumatic process. Now, obviously, that moment, it was like that moment in the movies where you hear bad news and then everything goes silent, and you're in this vacuum of just despair. And it just felt like, it really did feel like a bad dream. Now, I'm not trying to dramatize this and say this for sympathy or anything like that. I'm just illustrating that it was, or trying to explain that it was a really rough moment in my life. And I also want to say in this moment that if you've ever experienced a loss of a baby at any point, whether it was 6 weeks, 4 weeks, 21 weeks, full term, whatever you have gone through, it's okay to grieve. And that was one of the big lessons that I learned in that process, was that we need to allow ourselves to grieve. A lot of people played it down and said, at least it wasn't too far along, or, 1 in 4 women experience miscarriage. I don't know, I think it's 1 in 8 maybe. But whatever the stats are, it is quite common. So people would try to comfort me with those facts. I once had someone say, "Oh, don't worry, young and beautiful, you'll fall pregnant again." And I just thought, that's not comforting at all. I need a bit more encouragement than that. And I still felt like this was my child. Whether because of that first moment that you find out you're pregnant, you're like, there's this little life growing in me. I'm in love with it from the moment, even though I haven't met the child yet, and I don't have a name, and I didn't even know if it was a boy or a girl. But there's this intense love. And so I just remember thinking, it doesn't matter what stage of growth this child is, it's a life. It's a life that God put in me, and I should be allowed to grieve. And so it was uncomfortable, but I really felt like God taught me how to grieve. And what we actually ended up doing as well is having a little get-together with close friends, small group, and we had almost like a little memorial for our little baby, who we subsequently named Jem, which was short for Jeremiah, from Jeremiah chapter 1, and it was just what was on our heart at the time. And it was so healing. And so I learned to appreciate life no matter how developed it is. I realized that a life can be successful even if it lives for 5 days in the womb, or 7 years outside, or 70 years outside the womb. I realized that if we really truly believe that life begins at conception, then we get to celebrate life in all its forms. And so that was such an eye-opening experience for me. And what I also learned in that process, now the next few months were really hard. There was a lot of trauma going through it, and also just seeing friends fall pregnant, going to baby showers, just feeling such a deep loss. It was grief. It was really this loss of a dream, this loss of a life. And I remember I was also involved in music ministry at our church at the time. And I remember that at that stage, there was this new song that came out back then. And I don't know if you know the song, but it's King of My Heart. And it goes, "You are good, you are good." And then the bridge says, "You're never going to let me down." And interestingly, that when that song came to church, it was a big thing, and it's a beautiful song. It still makes me emotional. But I was involved in music ministry and actually had to sing that song for the first time in church myself. And I thought, this is a joke. Like, how just after I've gone through the worst thing I can go through, how can I sing that God is good? And there again, I learned a very important lesson, that sometimes you sing it because you believe it, and sometimes you sing it until you believe it. I learned that faith wasn't something that you experience in an emotional way always. Sometimes it's like, Father, I choose to trust you. I don't get it. I don't have the answers. This doesn't seem fair, but I trust you, and I know that you're good. And so another amazing, important lesson. Now, if you chat to my husband today, he'll tell you that time after we lost our first was such a beautiful time for our marriage as well, because watching me, this is just what he said to me, but he said watching me, he grew a respect for me because of just how I walked through that. And it strengthened our marriage, it deepened our marriage. There's something about going through loss and suffering that deepens something within you, and it deepens something within our relationship. And so moving on with the story, I for the first few months, we decided we weren't going to stop trying to fall pregnant. We just obviously had to follow doctor's instructions with a waiting period and all of that. But I was very fortunate in that we fell pregnant about 4 months later. So it wasn't a long wait. I wouldn't know what it's like to struggle with infertility, and that must be very, very hard. But we fell pregnant with Eli, who's our oldest. Now, again, what we do is we tell ourselves, okay, this has happened once, so this couldn't possibly happen again. It is, we've gone through the hard part of this now, so now it's just going to be good. Like now the sun has come up in the morning, and it's going to go the way that I want it to. And what I realized is that that's not exactly how it works. But my pregnancy with Eli was actually such a great one. It was beautiful. And I just remember, even right in the beginning, when I found out I was pregnant, it was obviously very hard the first couple of months, especially just fear of loss. Because now, pregnancy doesn't always result in a baby. Sometimes it doesn't work out. And that was a hard thing to come to terms with, and to still believe and still be hopeful and still celebrate. And I remember just sitting in the bath, just thinking, okay, like, God, this life is yours. No matter what happens, like, I trust you, and I trust that this child is ultimately yours. And that was a beautiful moment of just letting go, because there was a depth there based on what I'd gone through before that. Anyway, and so I had a great pregnancy with Eli. And then around 33 weeks of pregnancy, I started to feel really sick. And when you're pregnant, you kind of expect to feel awful, because there's like no part of your body that doesn't feel awful when you're pregnant, unless you're just a very, very fortunate person. But generally, you're sore, and your muscles hurt, and you have headaches, and you feel nauseous or heartburn. There's a long list of things. But I felt really off. And I figured, okay, well, in about 2 days, I'm going to be at the gynae for my 33-week checkup anyway, so let me just wait for then. I didn't imagine that anything could possibly be very wrong, and again, just very idealistic. And there's nothing wrong with being hopeful, by the way. There's nothing wrong with believing the best, because the alternative is believing the worst, and that's not a great way to live. But anyway, so we went to the scan, and I remember that appointment because my mom came with. I invited her with, and thought, she's in town, so she can come and look at the scan with us. So very special. But at the appointment, because I was so swollen, I had what they call cankles, like where your leg and your ankle and your foot are all one width. And I was so swollen. I had such bad headaches. My body hurt. I just felt very sick. And then the doctor, after doing the tests and testing my blood pressure and protein in the urine, all of that, she said, listen, you've got preeclampsia, which is quite severe. I'm going to have to admit you straight away, and we're going to have to see how it goes, give you medication to see if we can get your blood pressure down. Now, I didn't know what preeclampsia was, and also didn't think that I could get that. I was quite healthy. It's generally people that are older or maybe overweight or have pre-existing conditions. So there was like almost no reason at 27 for me to develop this, but this is what happened. And within that night, it was quite clear that I wasn't going to be able to carry my child for much longer. I was very sick, and preeclampsia is really, it's like high blood pressure, and it seems to be linked to the placenta and the health of the placenta. Not to get all sciencey and medical with you, because I'm not. That's not my strong point. But essentially, I was very sick, and it's very dangerous for mom and subsequently the baby. And so they had to do an emergency C-section the following morning. And this was 2 days before my baby shower. I had nothing ready, no bags packed. And my whole world fell apart. This was like this day where nothing would ever be the same anymore, because suddenly my heart lived outside my body, as moms would often say, or parents would often say. But more than that, it was just this, I can't believe that this has happened. I can't believe that how I thought this would go, it's turned out this way. It felt like I was robbed of something, because I wanted natural birth and I wanted that experience. In fact, at that very appointment, I came with my beautifully printed birth plan to my gynae. And that thing only lived for like 20 minutes before it completely changed. And so it was it was hard. There was a lot of grief there. And then the next part of that was having my baby in the NICU, the neonatal intensive care unit. So he was premature. He was 1.8 at birth, very tiny, skin and bones. At 33 weeks, he was not in any immediate danger, but he was little, because at that stage they need to still learn how to breathe on their own. They need to learn how to eat. They need to regulate their body temperature. And there's a lot that needs to happen, because obviously he almost still was supposed to have like 2 months in the room. And that was really hard. That was probably one of the hardest things I've had to go through, was these 41 days that he spent in hospital, because after I was released after giving birth, I had to leave him there for another few weeks and go daily to go and visit my baby. And it was so hard. And there was another important lesson that I learned. And I've shared this in the past with people, but I want to share again that I remember just sitting next to his bed, especially that first week, and thinking, there's nothing I can do for him. I couldn't even pick him up in the first week. He had all these wires, and they were going through his umbilical cord, and it was like quite serious the first few days. And he had an infection and all of that. And so it was very scary, but I felt so helpless. I felt like I'm his mom. I'm supposed to be taking care of him, and yet all I can do is sit. I had to learn how to let go from the very moment my child was born. I only got to see him like 24 hours later, actually more than 24 hours, where I was strong enough to actually go up to the NICU and actually go and see him. I only started breastfeeding him at 5 weeks old. There was a lot of things that I didn't get to do. But I remember sitting with this little book of prayers by Stormie Martian and sitting in the NICU, and all I could do was sing for him and pray for him and pray these prayers over him. And that was such a lifesaver, but such an important lesson as well, is that Eli didn't belong to me. He never did. I was assigned to be his earthly mother that would take care of his basic needs and coach him through life and love him wildly. But in that moment, all I could do was love him. I couldn't really take care of him. And I had to learn this very important lesson, to let go. And that's really a lot of what motherhood can be, is learning to let go. And so I ended up having another child 2.5 years later, and that's a beautiful story of God's redemption. I ended up having a C-section again, but it was a full-term baby. She was double the size of Eli, and she was healthy. I got to take her home after 4 days. It was just a beautifully redemptive experience, and I'm very grateful for that. But I think if I look at all these parts of my motherhood journey, losing a baby, going through a premature birth and having a baby in the NICU, and all of these moments of motherhood, what I've realized more than anything is that the point of pregnancy isn't pregnancy, it's to be a mother, it's to be a parent. Even the point of giving birth and motherhood, it's not even about me. And we can sometimes idolize motherhood. We can romanticize how it's going to be, and we can often even make it about us feeling good about ourselves, because you know how much attention people get with little babies, and when they're pregnant, you know, it feels good. It really does feel good. But when the tire meets the road, when you're in those moments alone, where it's really hard, where you have to deal with screaming babies, and you have to cope with moments where you don't know what you're doing, and it's scary and all of that. Those are the moments where you let go of your ideals and you trust God, because you don't have control over the outcome. I don't have control over how long my children live. I don't have control over if they are healthy or sick, other than the basic things I can do, like feeding them well and trying to take care of their health. ultimately I don't have full control. But I do know that I can be a good steward of their lives today. I know that I can be a good steward of my own life and my own heart and my own maturity and growth so that I can mother them well. But I know that motherhood is a calling. It's more than just something that you feel like doing because it seems fun or it seems like it would feel good. It feels amazing some days, but other days it's really hard. And I have to remind myself that I chose to have these beautiful children. God trusted me with their lives, and so I'm going to lay myself down. I'm going to lay down my own desire and my own ideals, and love them as best I can, and be grateful for every day that I have with them. Grateful for every day that I get to walk this journey with them. So in this episode, it's Finding the Funny. I'm going to share just something that really helps me to enjoy life more. So not necessarily funny, but more fun. And so remember, this Finding the Funny is something I'm going to be ending off every episode with, where we just learn to laugh and enjoy life. Not everything has to be heavy, and not everything has to be super serious. Sometimes we can just laugh, and sometimes we can laugh at the absurdity of it. It helps. It's medicine. We know that comedy and tragedy often go hand in hand, and there's something beautiful about being able to laugh. Now, in this episode, it's Finding the Funny. It's less about fun and funny and more like fun. And what I really like to do. Now, I love music. I have a background in music, so it comes naturally to me. But even if you don't, you can appreciate a good song. And so music has become a very big part of me enjoying life. Now, my kids absolutely hate this, but I love to sing at the top of my lungs and dance in a weird way in the car on the way to school, and just get like really cool upbeat songs that are funny. And I go for golden oldies. I love old school funk, and so they find it extremely embarrassing and they moan at me a lot, but I'm going to keep doing it because I know one day they'll appreciate it. But what I think the point I'm making is, use music as a way to find fun in your life. Now, what I've done, I've got a feel-good playlist on my music app. So I've got a song that is on, or songs that are on shuffle, and it's like my favorite songs that just make me feel good. I like upbeat songs. I like things that are just easy to sing along to. And so when I wake up and I feel tired and off and I don't feel like facing the day, I listen to one of those songs, or I listen to my playlist, or I have dance parties in the kitchen with my kids often. And that works really well at the end of the day when everyone is cranky. And so we have a little dance party, and I promise it changes the mood instantly. So find the fun in your life. Use music. It's a gift that we've been given. And so thank you so much for listening, and be sure to join me for the next episode of Living in Between.